The National Guard has basically been mobilized in a number of states across the U.S. and this is from Mint Press News, a really amazing independent news site. Highly recommend checking it out. This article is from Alan McLeod. National Guard now authorized to use live ammunition as they flood America's streets again. I haven't been seeing, I don't know, maybe a handful of protesters who have actually been armed. They have all been unarmed. It's the police force, the security state that has been absolutely armed to the teeth and escalating tensions, using excessive use of force, shooting people in the eyes with rubber bullets, pepper spraying, tear gassing peaceful protesters, NYPD, LAPD, all kinds of different jurisdictions using their police cars to indiscriminately basically try to commit vehicular homicide. All people just being shoved very violently when they're walking away, people being pepper sprayed, maced in their home from police, from the National Guard, and then now the National Guard's coming in. It is insane. And again, this is being used, these military grade weapons technology are being used on people in the United States now. Our imperialist, racist foreign policy, all that technology, all that training is now being used on people in the internal colonies within the United States, particularly obviously marginalized communities, communities of color, low income communities, and now against these protesters who are protesting for Black lives and end to indiscriminate police violence against people and communities of color. And this is how it's being trying to be brutally repressed by the security state. It's disgusting. Already deployed in multiple states, over 10,000 guardsmen are scheduled to flood Minneapolis streets, representing the first time in its 164-year history that the organization has been fully mobilized. And they've been authorized to carry live ammunition. Again, this is, I mean, obviously, our foreign policy is corrupt, it's fucked, it's unethical, it's immoral. You know, we had 500 plus thousand civilians killed in Iraq alone. The sanctions in the 90s, I believe, killed like 500,000 children. We're supporting the Saudi led genocide in Yemen right now. We have, sanctions on Iran, on Venezuela, on Cuba that are just, forms of economic warfare. Um, I mean, the United States is the biggest violator of human rights in the world. Let's also not forget it's the biggest penal colony. We incarcerate more people than anywhere in the world. 5% of the population the United States has, with 25% of the world's prison population. Not the land of the free, people. I'm sorry to burst your little bubble if you're still thinking that. The national security state and the military joining forces with the police and National Guard to counter the nationwide protest movement that has exploded since the police killing of unarmed black man George Floyd on Monday. In response to police capitulation in Minneapolis, leaving their precinct to be burned down. Love to see it. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has called in the National Guard to put down the revolt. Already deployed in multiple states, over 10,000 guardsmen are scheduled to flood Minneapolis streets. We already read that. While Walt's actions might appear drastic, it appears he's actually a moderate influence as Washington is pushing him to put active duty military on the streets. Okay, let's read that again. As Washington is pushing him to put active duty military on the streets. Quote, I think it's really important for folks to think about the uniqueness of our nation of protecting civil liberties to make sure that civilian control of the military, and especially inside the United States, is carried out by civilians, by citizen soldiers of the National Guard. Let's be real, there's still Army. They're still going to be using military-grade weapons and technology. I mean, Jesus Christ. Yesterday, the Pentagon ordered soldiers and military police from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Drum, New York, Fort Riley, Kansas, and Fort Carson, Colorado, to be ready to be deployed to potentially anywhere in the U.S. within a matter of hours. Authorities also deployed a Predator drone to Minneapolis to monitor the protests. So it'll basically be the end of the United States once either the police decide that they're not going to keep just completely brutalizing these peaceful protesters, or when the National Guard, if and when a majority of them decide they're not going to brutalize their own citizens, then the state will no longer have any legitimacy because they won't have a monopoly of force. They won't be able to, enforce these things anymore. These draconian policies, these curfews. They won't be able to brutalize these peaceful protesters if the police and the military aren't willing to do their bidding anymore. And we'll see what happens. We'll see. I mean, that's basically, I believe, what led to the fall. East Germany, because I believe the security state at that point was no longer willing to basically attack the civilian population. They weren't willing to follow the government's orders, if I'm remembering correctly. According to documents linked to The Nation, the military is actively monitoring uprisings in 6 other states: New York, Ohio, Colorado, Arizona, Tennessee, and Kentucky, and shit's obviously going on in California, in Washington. I've seen stuff in North Carolina, Virginia, obviously Minnesota, as we already talked about, Illinois. See, Waltz revealed yesterday that he's already working closely with the military, receiving, quote, intelligence support, what they're seeing, what they're signal intercepting. They have obviously from NSA and other massive support to be able to see these operators are. The NSA is supposed to be a purely foreign intelligence agency, but indeed, I'm glad they're pointing out Snowden. But as Edward Snowden revealed, the agency was conducting a massive spying operation both internationally and domestically. Waltz later claimed that he misspoke when referencing NSA by name. I'm sure he did. They were probably in his ear as soon as he got off the call, because they were probably listening to him too. We're the NSA, but you can't be saying that we're spying on people. We're trying to get rid of that message. Snowden kind of painted us with a bad light by telling us the truth about our global espionage program, including against our own citizens. We're trying not to highlight that, Governor. I mean, look at this. This is like fucking insane. This is on in the streets in front of some state capitol, wherever that is in the United States. These fucking military grade vehicles, whatever the fuck that is, a Stryker, whatever. Yeah, St. Paul, Minnesota, on May 31st, so earlier today. I like this. So this is what I'm talking about. This is what we need to hear. Some National Guard members appear to be profoundly uncomfortable with the idea of being deployed to oppose protesters. Yeah, no shit, they should be if they have any type of, class solidarity and aren't just complete, bootlickers to power. One anonymous guardsman told The Nation's Ken Klippenstein, quote, "We're a combat unit not trained for riot control or safely handling civilians in this context. Soldiers up and down the ranks are scared about hurting someone, and leaders are worried about soldiers suffering liability," adding, "My colleagues are people of common sense and common decency. They may not want to step over any lines when doing their jobs, but wanting only goes so far when you're undertrained and under-equipped." Then you have complete nut job, Donald Trump claiming that anti-fascists, the people that, counter protests and put Nazis and white supremacists in check, they're terrorists. Trump siding with the terrorists. Trump, however, appears very keen to see the National Guard respond to the protest. Quote, I can't stand back and watch this happen to a great American city, Minneapolis. A total lack of leadership. Either the very weak radical left mayor Jacob Frey get his act together and bring the city under control, or will send in the National Guard and get the job done right. He stated that riding thugs, and again, using the term thugs, that's a very racially coded word, and it sends certain signals that we're sending in the National Guard to basically tamp down and further oppress black people and communities of color, and it's obviously a signal to his racist base. When the rioting starts, the shooting starts. Thank you, he concluded, clearly encouraging a violent crackdown against protesters, which is what a lot of police have been doing. Excuse me. The country's police already, indeed, resemble a heavily armed military. Between 1998 and 2014, the value of military hardware given to U.S. police departments ballooned from $9.4 million to $796.8 million, with police departments across the country equipped with armored personnel carriers, tanks, and other machines appropriate only for a battlefield. Police are also increasingly trained to view citizens as threats and criminals rather than members of the public they are serving. I mean, Jesus Christ, this is getting nuts. And then, yeah, I think this is going into the racist origins of police in the United States, where they're basically founded as slave patrols. Both America's police and army have serious problems with white supremacy. The modern police force evolved from the slave patrol forces of the 18th to 19th centuries and were a key force in maintaining and promoting white supremacy and the slave labor system. Meanwhile, Matt Kennard's book, Irregular Army, details how after 9/11, the U.S. military began actively recruiting from neo-Nazi gangs and militias in order to fulfill its recruitment quotas. The deep state has always attempted to infiltrate and derail struggles for civil rights. The FBI infamously carried out a campaign of targeted assassinations against the Black Liberation Movement between the 1960s and 1980s, even sending a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King, I remember this, reading about this, telling him to kill himself. It is unlikely, therefore, that the National Guard's security state's reaction to the latest protests will be a positive one, indeed. So, the National Guard is being deployed in its full force, I guess, for the first time in 164 years against its own citizens who are peacefully protesting, who are uprising, who are rebelling against the racist, white supremacist police state. They're wanting accountability. They're tired of people in their communities getting shot, getting killed, getting choked to death, getting the knee of a police officer on George Floyd's neck for 10 minutes, killing him. The straw that broke the camel's back. Obviously, this kind of stuff has been happening for decades. We just have more evidence now because of technology and cameras. It's really bringing it to light, and people are fed up. These communities are fed up. The allies of these communities are fed up, and they're not going to take it anymore. They're getting in the streets. They're fighting for change. We need to, do everything that we can to support each other during these crazy times. Stay safe. If you're going out there, cover your face. Turn off, the location thing on your phone. Make a makeshift gas mask if you can. Make a little thing or to help yourself with tear gas. I think it's like a mix of water and half like antacid mix or something like that. Just Google how to make like a gas mask. There's a pretty easy little tutorial I found. I believe it's from Dissident Objects, 6 easy steps to make a gas mask. And if you're not able to do that, get some type of solution that you're able to, spray your eyes, spray your fellow protesters' eyes if you do get tear gassed. Film the police and stay safe, protect each other. It's been nuts out there. It's going to get more nuts. The White House is basically on lockdown. They shut down the lights, I think, like the first time ever during a protest. Trump's hiding out in his bunker. Same guy who thought it made him look weak to wear a face mask, a mask, is now hiding out in the bunker. Protests are right outside the White House. National Guard's coming in to tamp down this peaceful rebellion, this mostly peaceful movement, and we'll see where it goes from here. It's getting intense. Stay safe. Peace. Much love.